All right. He's going to beam us up.
Okay, there you go.
All right. Okay, we're going to start the Ad Hoc Committee on Economic Recovery and Reinvestment, the special meeting Friday, January the 15th. We have a quorum, Mr. Rosenthal, Mr. Alarcon, myself, Bernard Parks, and we have other members en route. We'll start off with the overview from the CAO's office as it relates to the status of grant applications.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Bill Kreitz with the CAO's office. Jim Clark, who's normally here, is in Washington today, and he gave me something to read to you. I think Jim doesn't trust me to ad-lib this, so he gave me something and made me promise to read it. So I'm going to read to you. Very good news. The city this week, on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, in aggregate, the city found out or was notified that we have been awarded $111.5 million by virtue of 3 grants. Now, your dashboards and the report that we provided to you yesterday do not reflect that amount of money yet. It came in, that amount came in after we had already prepared the reports. So if you look at the amount that we've been awarded, the $474,508,000, that is actually now, if you include this $111.5 million, we have now been awarded approximately $586 million as recently as this week. So that's very good news, and Jim asked that I emphasize that with you. Those 3 grants, one was on Tuesday, we received notice of a $4 million award to the Department of Labor program entitled Pathways Out of Poverty. You might be familiar with that project. On Wednesday, Secretary of Commerce Gary Locke came to LA and he announced an award of $7.5 million for the Broadband Technology Opportunities Program, which is also, the acronym is BTOP, that you've probably heard of, and that enhances the broadband access to undeserved areas through public computing centers. And the third item, which we heard about on Thursday, we learned through Mercedes Marquez, our former director of the Housing Department, now at HUD, and that was for a $100 million grant for Neighborhood Stabilization Program Part or Phase 2. So in aggregate, that's $111.5 million.
And that Mercedes Marquez announced that we would get, what the details are of that, what that specifically does, and what kinds of jobs we're talking about.
Yes, Mr. Rosendahl. If I could read from exactly what Jim told me to read from, which I didn't do, he said, prior to the passage of ARA, the Congress passed legislation for Neighborhood Stabilization Program 1, and we received $28 million at that time to combat increases in home foreclosures. The city has 28,000 housing units, he says, in foreclosure, and the additional funding will significantly help us to continue to acquire and rehabilitate foreclosed properties. Restored single-family properties will be sold to qualified home buyers, and multi-unit properties will be sold to qualified affordable housing organizations to maintain as long-term affordable rental properties. The grant was the second largest in the country, exceeded only by the state of Michigan's Housing Authority. And in addition to this, actually, the LA Neighborhood Housing Services, which is a nonprofit that works closely with the city on foreclosure prevention and home buyer education, they received a separate $60 million out of the same grant opportunity, Phase 2, which will further alleviate the housing crisis in the city. Actually, I'd have to go back to the one-pager to give you more details, and I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
But I can get back to you if you'd like with that.
Thank you.
Let me just ask on the neighborhood stabilization, same criteria, same areas of emphasis?
I believe it was the same, yes. I believe this is round or Phase 2 of that money. And that would conclude what Jim Clark, good morning. That would conclude what Mr. Clark asked me to read to you. And if I could get to the briefing, the overall project management briefing, I'd like to do so. Mr. Garcetti, I had just mentioned to the committee earlier that this week we were notified on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in aggregate that we had received $111.5 million from 3 R awards. I'm sure you're aware of that. That now brings us up to approximately $586 million in awards, which is slightly different than the table I have on the front page of your briefing, because that was prepared before that those amounts were added. And by the way, speaking of Mr. Garcetti, you've asked me on numerous occasions to mention to those that are listening or watching on television or by their computer that the city's website is recovery.lacity.org, and those dashboards and those reports that we're referring to and that we're looking at today are available to the public to look at. And as of next week, that they will reflect the addition of the $111.5 million. If I can, since this committee met last, there have been 8 applications submitted. One by DWP for $48 million for the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Retrofit Ramp Up and General Innovation Fund Program. One by CDD for approximately $8 million, and we'll be looking at that, I believe, today. I'm sorry, actually we are not looking at that. That's a different program. The Community Development, CRA, or Community Redevelopment Agency, has submitted an item for $5 million. We will be looking at that today. DWP submitted a separate application for $3.5 million for workforce training for the electric power sector. It's called Topic B. In addition, they submitted an application for $456,000 for the workforce training for the electric power sector called Topic A. The Planning Department submitted an application since we last met for $2.2 million for the Transit-Oriented Districts South Los Angeles project, and that's where the city proposes to create a comprehensive citywide policy to promote transit-oriented districts focusing on 5 Blue Line and 5 Green Line stations in the South Los Angeles area as pilot projects. Furthermore, the Office of the City Attorney has submitted an application for ARA funding for $464,000 to the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health for what they call the Target program. And that's teens and retailers getting educated on tobacco. I like that acronym. The CRA further submitted an application for $250,000 to the County Department of Public Health for the convenience store conversion program. So we have 8 applications that have been submitted since this committee last met. With respect to the project management aspects of this, of ARA, I'm very happy to tell you that for the January 15th OMB compliance deadline, which is today, the city, we set a deadline of the 12th. All city departments who are required to report to OMB have reported successfully. We have a 100% compliance with OMB reporting for the second consecutive quarter. We had 16 ARA grants by 11 departments that were reported on. Furthermore, there were 31 sub-recipient, where the city is a sub-recipient. In other words, we get the money indirectly through, say, Caltrans or the State Water Resources Control Board and things like that. Those we consider sub-recipients. The city has successfully met all of the sub-recipient requirements for reporting, and that was for 31 projects by 8 city departments. So in aggregate, we have 47 projects, ARA-funded projects, that have successfully met the reporting requirements. So we have 100% for both prime and sub-recipients. And I would like to thank very much all the departments and the bureaus that work so hard to get those reports in. I would also like to say that we have jobs and expenditure information as a result of those reports. We're also collecting that information via another vehicle that we call the Project Health Report, which those reports are due by the departments by close of business today. And we will be bringing to you a report in the near future on the jobs and the expenditures in aggregate from the beginning of ARA through December 31st. So you can be looking for that as well. All the dashboards that you have in front of you have been posted to the internet this week, and they're available for the public. What I might say at this point, I realize we have other items to look at today, that grant applications since the last meeting I mentioned are 8. Grant projects for which funding has been requested. We've actually requested funding for 146 projects for a total of $1.47 billion. I'd like to say we're going to get all of that. I don't think so, but so far we've been awarded, as I mentioned, with the addition of those $111.5 million this week, $586 million in awards that result from 82 separate awards. And for next week, between this committee meeting and next meeting, we do not anticipate any applications being submitted. And I'd be glad to answer some questions or have the departments come up.
Okay. Mr. Rosendahl.
Yes, I appreciate that report. It was great. Just a couple of overview questions. We've taken in $586 million. Do we have any sense of the tracking of what kinds of jobs this might have stimulated or will stimulate? I know what our projections were when we went in for the grants. Are we on target with that? Do you have any update on that aspect of it?
Do you know, Mr. Rosendahl, we've just finished this last night, so we're going to be looking today and next week at that information and extracting that from the Excel spreadsheets that were submitted, as well as the project health reports. So I have to say it'd be a little bit preliminary for me to estimate what those are. I don't really have a sense of it. Just I was kind of mired, honestly, in getting the reports in.
Yeah, well, fair enough. And I look forward to that in future reports, because the bottom line is this is supposed to be economic stimulus. It's supposed to be shovel-ready type. It's supposed to be job creation, obviously. This is what we're at. And for our great city to get $586 million and potentially, as you said, $1.47 billion, I want to see the track of how that goes to jobs. And in a broader question, just a philosophical question, as you well know, our budget situation is dire. It's more dire this year because there are no quick strategies that might require furloughs, layoffs, and things like that. Is any of this money able to be effectively used in helping us retain jobs, basic service jobs that our city does that are somewhat in jeopardy right now if we were to do furloughs and layoffs? I know I can tell you my constituents raised that issues to me last night about basic services and basic situations. Can some of this have applications to that issue that we're dealing with?
The answer is absolutely yes. The jobs component is divided between creating jobs, private and public sector, as well as retaining jobs, private and public sector. I am aware of jobs that have been retained, I believe, in the Department of Transportation, some of those for what's called the RSTP, but I don't have a handle on those yet, and I'll tell you why. The OMB reports aggregate, it just says jobs. It doesn't say jobs retained, jobs created. Right. So we have had to create, we took a lesson from the one-pager that this committee has asked us to modify, and we've broken out jobs created versus jobs retained. So that information is being collected via the project health reports that are due from the departments today. So I can definitely say there is a job retention factor for city employees. What that is and exactly where those are at this point, I really don't know. But we should have that information for you. As soon as we get those reports in today, we'll be working all next week putting that information together.
Because it's very exciting to hear that could be job retention of some critical jobs within our city's service needs with our constituents. So I'm assuming Miguel Santana is deeply aware of every aspect of these proposals that might impact our budget crisis.
Well, we'll be briefing him next week, too. It was a little preliminary because we don't have aggregate information yet. We just finished it last night. But we will be briefing him next week on what the results are from our information that we get.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rosendahl. Along those lines, is it possible, and Mr. Parks, our budget chairman, has been very good in terms of looking at the general fund impact where there's additional costs, but have we tried to quantify of these? We know a lot are for special funds, some are for private, construction, et cetera. Have we been able to quantify it all, or could we, do you think, with any ease or without putting people to work just on this, quantify what the general fund help has been from this, if any? Because it gets to the heart, I think, of the job retention. What Mr. Rosendahl was talking about, we are looking at an unprecedented budget deficit, like most municipalities and states around the country, due to the economic downturn. We're looking at some extremely difficult choices before us, reducing our workforce, cutting programs more deeply than anybody's ever seen, et cetera. And as we budget for next year, we're trying to peg exactly what sources of revenue we have. If this is not in that discussion, we're going to make cuts even deeper than hitting the target exactly where we need to. And it would be just helpful to know if there's been any general fund relief, either because special positions are retained and that frees up some money for the general fund, or because it directly goes to general funded programs.
Mr. Garcetti, we will look into that. I think the impact, at this point, it might be a little early for me to comment on the impact. Certainly that's a desire.
And just to be clear, I don't mean a secondary impact. Obviously, economic activity leads to sales tax and things like that. I'm talking about direct.
You mean direct impact. You know what? If we could look at that and we would include that in our report, I would be glad to do that.
That would be helpful for us. I know it would be helpful for the budget chair as we move forward, especially, too, as we look at some of the things which will continue, it looks like, in the federal government. For instance, the energy efficiency block grants. If those continue next year, that's a line item that we can look at some of the things that we've been doing out of the general fund and perhaps relieve it to a large degree for some of our environmental programs, et cetera. So
we will absolutely address those items when we get this report to you.
But it was certainly a good week for our libraries and our rec centers with the broadband award, which was a competitive one, as you mentioned, and the neighborhood stabilization program. It's great. We have, as the woman who now oversees it, had that program, our former general manager, so I think there was intimate knowledge of just how good this program is here. She wasn't the decision maker. It was done in a fair manner, but the fact that we were that far ahead of the competitive curve reflects well on the city and on its housing policies to retain people before they get into foreclosure, or those homes after they do get into foreclosure. Other questions, Mr. Parks?
No, I appreciate your comments as it relates to the impact on the general fund, because I think as we monitored a number of the jobs that we've identified, many of them are maintaining existing city jobs. And so therefore, the payroll and such continues, the administrative overhead continues, and so it's the one thing keeping jobs going and able to provide those services. But I think a lot of people thought that some of this money would be creating jobs outside of government and would not continue to put the burden on government for the overhead and administrative costs. So that would be very, very helpful, because sometimes, as we all know, when you really analyze a grant, you have to go back and find out, are you really getting everything that you thought you were getting, and also whether you're spending more money than you're receiving. And so that's something that's very, very important for the general fund at this time. Even though some of it's reimbursement, you still got to front the money, and many instances money you don't have.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. We will try to report on that. I remember having been at this committee since March, but I think you and one of the other council members, Smith, maybe it was Mr. Smith, have asked us, and Mrs. Hahn, I believe, have asked us repeatedly about the jobs in the private sector. And so that has been a theme that this committee has brought forward. So we will try to address that for you in your meeting, in our report to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee on that? On the general report? If not, let's go ahead then and go to items 1A and B.
Mr. Chair, if I could just conclude with this item.
Sure.
I just noticed Jim Clark will not forgive me if I fail to mention that his softball
just how well the softball team is going.
They lost 12-8, unfortunately.
In the championship?
They lost. But they got a second-place trophy, so I just want to make sure I...
Look, if we come in second on stimulus funding in this country, I'll be happy with that's a happy second-place finish. And it shows that the underdog can come from behind. It's not always about winning the grand prize. But
thank you very much.
Our regrets to Mr. Clark. I'm sure he's at home recovering from that tough loss. All right, let's go ahead to 1A.
Good morning, council members.
Are you on the team? The softball team?
Oh, no, I'm not.
Okay.
I wish I were.
Next year.
We would have won.
Yes, absolutely.
Good morning. My name is Romel Pasquale. I'm the interim deputy mayor for Energy and Environment. We're here today to provide you all with update and overview of the state energy program grants. As you may know, the state received, as part of its ERA allocation, almost $226 million in resources to implement a state energy program, of which $115 million will be awarded in 3 funding categories, 2 of the funding categories that the city of LA had applied for. 3 funding categories are the way that we look at it, one is focused on municipal financing, the second is focused on municipal and commercial building targeted measures, and the third is focused on a comprehensive residential program. The way that we frame this or look at this is that the first category talks about financing. The second category talks about bricks and mortar, the actual construction of and the types of energy efficiencies one provides in buildings. And the third is focused on a service providing type of approach, which is a weatherization approach. The first program is a program that was, the financing program was applied, the CRA LA applied for that program. The second program was an application from CDD, EAD, DWP, and GSD for municipal commercial buildings. And the third category is an LA County application, which we are partners of, but not the leads in. LA County is the only one who would be eligible to provide those types of services outlined in that. So this morning, we have members of CRA, EAD, CDD, and GSD staff would be providing you with presentations on categories 1 and 2, the financing model and the bricks and mortar model. So I'll turn it over to CDD and EAD to begin.
Good morning. I'm Farida Avila, Senior Management Analyst.
Can you bring the microphone a bit closer so we can all enjoy your report? Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Farida Avila, Senior Management Analyst with the Community Development Department. CDD, in part, the grant that we applied for is the Municipal and Commercial Building Targeted Retrofit Program, and CDD applied in partnership with General Services Division, Department of Water and Power, the Joint Training Institute, and the Los Angeles Community College. The purpose and focus of this program is to create and provide programs for significant energy savings from the targeted retrofit program. We applied for $8 million, and it's divided among these three major departments. GSD, $3.5 million is what GSD applied for the retrofit of municipal buildings. $3 million DWP for the retrofit of commercial buildings, and $1.5 million would go to CDD for training, recruitment, and outreach for jobs related to this retrofit program. In addition to the retrofit, another major focus of this solicitation for proposal is for the training and providing of jobs for training and entry-level workers as well as professional tradespeople. The $1.5 million that will go to CDD is going to be divided among Los Angeles Community College District for training and recruitment, as well as the WorkSource centers, WorkSource family, and OneSource centers, who will be assisting us in providing the necessary case management, recruitment, and everything else that is needed to get the jobs going. I am now going to pass this over to Craig, who is going to give us an overview of what GSD will be doing.
Good morning. Craig Tranby, Environmental Affairs. I can speak to the GSD portion of the program. Basically, under the Green Retrofits and Workforce Ordinance, GSD has set out to retrofit city facilities, hundreds of facilities across the city, and create jobs in the local communities. We were looking at a very specific part of that for this grant to match up what the state was asking for, so they're looking at targeted measures. We identified about 20 of the lowest performing buildings in the highest unemployment areas to do these targeted measure retrofits. Targeted measures include things like smart lighting, automation controls in the interiors of the buildings. So for of those, that's kind of how the $3.5 million for GSD gets divvied up.
Those are all municipal?
They're all municipal buildings.
Oh, for your part, yeah.
Yes.
Do you have a list of those, any chance?
Yes, there is a list available. That went in the application. The list was initially made at 25, and of those, we'll be selecting 20 of those. We gave ourselves a few extra in terms of leeway.
If we could have that for the committee, that would be great.
Yes.
If we got that list, thank you.
So, I don't know, I guess DWP is maybe not here this morning, but I can briefly speak to their component as well, because it's very similar.
Just on that, on your component, so what sort of formula, or was it less quantitative than that, on income versus energy audit? How did you assess the energy use in these buildings and that they were inefficient?
Yes, we actually gathered up all the energy usage data for a large group, hundreds of city buildings, and created a benchmark, a baseline. And we compared that to the Energy Star expected performance for those to understand how much they're underperforming in this case. So the very worst performers and the highest, again, unemployment areas were the ones that we parsed out for this grant.
So did we just make sure that they were in CDBG areas, and then we took that list based on energy performance, or I guess part of my question was, what was the formula on how those decisions got made, if any?
Right. So first we identified a subset. I think it was about the 50 lowest performers, and of those were sorted according to unemployment. And we took the top 20 to 25 of those.
Based on what sort of unemployment number? I mean, census tract? I mean, do we have
census
data?
Tract, yes. And we had a facility address, so we could get the census tract data. Okay. 2008 adjusted up to 2009 based on a wider metric.
Okay, super. That'd be an interesting list to see overall in the buildings, too. I'd love to take a look at it just citywide. Just out of curiosity, it's not as germane to what's before us today, but what percentage of our buildings were above the Energy Star level as a percentage of our percentage?
Right, and that's a continuing analysis going on. We have several hundred of the buildings into the system right now, but that analysis will be completed by GSD. Okay. Yeah, it's going to be a really detailed analysis.
Is that scheduled to come to council or anything? Has that been asked for separately? If not, could I refer that to Energy and Environment Committee for a hearing on that?
Sid, is that
or IT or IT?
If that's going through council separately?
No, as far as I know, it's not going through separately. And this is something we're doing. I'm sorry, Sid Salvo from Department of General Services. Sure. And what we're doing is we've already accumulated about approximately 300 buildings, city buildings, and we're actually doing the portfolio manager Department of Energy for that. Right. And right now, at present, we're gathering data, and we're going through the whole process together for 300, and then hopefully we'll end up doing the rest of the buildings, city buildings. But then that actually helping us with the selection process.
Good. Well, when you have it overall, if you'd send that to council, I'll refer it to Energy and Environment and our ITGS committee, whatever it is now, ITGA, I think, just because I think it would be instructive for the council. It would be an interesting public event, too. So.
I also wanted to add that using similar criteria, LADWP will be retrofitting 32 commercial buildings.
Okay. And as well as their own?
Yes.
Okay. Did you want to detail that you're talking about?
Yes. Actually, it's not their own buildings. It's 32 commercial buildings, private commercial buildings.
So they're not looking at their own buildings at all?
Not under this grant.
Okay.
Yeah, we're looking at council-controlled buildings operated by GSD, Rec and Parks, and Convention Center in this case. Okay. I think that covers it. Okay. So in the DWP instance, which I'm not as intimately familiar with, there are 32 buildings that will be identified through the Green Ambassadors program. They will be meeting similar criteria in terms of high unemployment area, buildings that are underperformers, that are highly visible, that offer good demonstrations as well, and a very similar set of targeted measures. Again, these that are called out by the state will be undertaken there, the smart lighting and the zone automations and things like that.
Okay. Any questions, colleagues? Michelle?
Yeah. These 500 jobs are going to be trained in this process, but the intent is to absorb them into the Department of Water and Power. Is that correct?
Some of them will be through Water and Power, yes, while others will be provided by GSD, as well as other jobs that will be recruited through existing programs with CDD.
Okay, I'm not sure you understood the question. I was talking about after the program. They're going to permanently be absorbed.
Because I took in my brother.
I don't think all of them will be permanent.
So what's going to happen to these workers after the program?
Because of their training, we are hoping that they will be qualified for additional jobs as they come along. But then we cannot guarantee permanent employment.
Okay. I was under the impression that in some of the grant language it included that DWP would absorb some of these people after the program.
I believe they will absorb some of them. However, DWP would be the best people to answer that question.
Okay, then the duration of this program is how long?
It's 18 months.
18 months. So what are we going to do to help these people get permanent employment?
The training should equip them not only for the jobs that are going to be generated from this program, but then also from other programs that should be from other jobs that should become available. We are working on various grants, as Mr. Clark had mentioned earlier. We are receiving several grants, and each of them provide various opportunities for jobs. But then again, I don't think I could say that this particular grant is going to result in permanent jobs for all 300.
Okay, it's very unusual to have a jobs program that doesn't have a job development component. So what's going to happen to these people when we finish with the 18 months? Are they just going to go on their own? Why have we not provided a development program to hire them permanently, whether in the private sector or DWP or wherever?
Yeah, that's something I believe that's going to be discussed further, and then I'm sure
we're discussing it right now. I want answers to this question. I'm particularly, does our community development department include into this and WorkSource programs?
Yes, they are. They are.
Can I get a better description of the job development aspect of this?
Yes, we'll make sure that we provide a better description for you.
Well, I was hoping to get it right now.
Some of the jobs are going to be permanent, but then again, we cannot guarantee that.
I'm not asking, that's not the question. The question is, what job development components have we put in place in this program to make sure that these people find employment at the end of this program? What's the point of stimulus if there's no permanence?
I might be able to speak to that. I think the Green Jobs initiative that Mr. Wesson has put forward, this also, and myself and others, that fits into, there's apprenticeship classes beforehand, so there's a piece of that. There's a academy that has been set up as the pipeline, and then the workforce centers are actually looking at developing specific relationships with construction, trade, and others, as well on the public and the private side, that would then be continuing pipeline of those jobs. So I know of a number of the workforce centers that are doing that, and it's part of the sector-based initiatives that the healthcare career ladders, for instance, was part of. This would be a new environmental career ladder.
I'm very well aware of all those other programs, but my problem is I don't see them in the application, and I just don't want to leave these people high and dry with some initial training, and then after 18 months they're gone. And let me point out, I'm a former CETA employee. And so I'm very particular about programs that provide temporary jobs but don't give you the assistance you need to get a permanent job.
Yeah, the way we're looking at this is the job assistance component is going to be conducted through the workforce center piece. We look at this very comprehensively, as Councilmember Garcetti had alluded to. We provide both the training piece, so we look for the millions of dollars that we've already applied for training. But what we always fallen down on was providing the bricks and mortar resources so that those that we've trained we actually have resources to put them into. So we've been able to secure close to $18 million in bricks and mortar money through energy efficiency block grant that the city and its municipal entities will be receiving to do retrofit work. We're looking for close to $8 million for this particular grant to then infuse more into bricks and mortar. We're looking at financing models to both finance municipal buildings as well as financing commercial sector. So we have to create this kind of market energy.
Well, let me tell you. Every job training program that I'm familiar with since the 70s, and I've worked with many of them, has a commitment to permanent employment for X number of clients. How many of these 500 people can we guarantee will get a job? Are we telling the federal government we're going to get 75% of them a permanent job? There's nothing in the application that indicates that.
Let us do this.
And so it begs the question as to whether we are truly committed to getting them a permanent job or whether we're just trying to take advantage of the stimulus money and run and cover.
It's a good point. And let us go back and let me go back and ask CDD as well as DWP those particular questions on permanency, because permanency is a really important issue that you raised, because it raises other issues about permanency in the context of both stimulus dollars, but also in the context of what we are currently going. What do we do with that?
Well, it defines success.
It does.
The purpose of stimulus is to have a permanent positive impact on the economy. If we do not guarantee, if these people do not have permanent jobs after, it's not a success, period.
It's a good point. We'll make sure to come back with you with a report.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions on this one? Not? Okay. Thank you very much. We'll go to number 2.
Let me also call up on David Hodgkins from the Clinton Climate Initiative, Clinton Foundation, who's been helping us to help frame the financing model for the second portion of the sub-grant. And Ginny Yoon from CRA will do the overview.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Gina Yoon. I'm from the CRA. We're actually here before you to actively get your approval or ask for your approval to submit an application for the SEP grant program under the Municipal Financing Program. The proposed program that CRA has put forward is to take advantage of recently passed state legislation, AB 811, which allows local municipalities to set up contractual assessment districts to help finance energy efficiency projects. Los Angeles County is in the process of forming a contractual tax assessment for the County of Los Angeles. The City of Los Angeles is proposing, what we are proposing is that the City of Los Angeles opt into the county program. And essentially what this does is allow property owners within the contractual assessment district to voluntarily subject themselves to a special tax to help finance the upfront costs of retrofits for their buildings. Our particular program would be focused on the large commercial sector. We believe there is tremendous energy savings potential trapped in existing buildings. And in particular, commercial property owners consume roughly 57% of the total energy within the City of Los Angeles. I should also mention that we are planning to come back within 30 days with a full report on our proposed program. What we are seeking today is just, again, approval on the grant application that we submitted, and just a little bit of background on that. We, up until about 3 days before the application due date, we had been working with LA County in participating in their grant application, and at the last minute, the county informed us that they would not be able to include us in their grant application. So in consultation with the mayor's office, we did decide to move forward. So we are asking for that approval today. in combination with the $3 million of formula EECBG grant funds, the $5 million that we have applied for under the SEP grant program will give us a total of $8 million in total funds for the municipal financing program. How we are proposing to use those funds is we would use $3.5 million of that to create a loan loss reserve. $3.3 million would be used to actually fund investment-grade energy efficiency audits. About $1 million would be used to actually set up and administer the program, and then roughly $200,000 would be used for to create a marketing and outreach strategy. So we believe that this program has the potential to leverage up to about $70 million of private capital to actually finance the energy retrofit work. And that's really the distinctive quality of our program, which is that it's a market-based program. It would leverage the federal stimulus funds with private capital to actually finance the energy efficiency work. We believe that this has the potential to retrofit about 120 commercial buildings throughout the city of Los Angeles and create up to about 835 jobs. Again, what we're attempting to do is essentially create a private capital market for energy efficiency retrofit work that does not currently exist. So beyond, if we are successful, we would be among the first large cities in the country to create a large-scale commercial retrofit program, and we would be creating a private capital market that would sustain itself beyond the 2-year RF period.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, but it's been very detailed. We're just about a minute before we have to start the full council. So.
Sure. The last thing I want to do was acknowledge the Clinton Climate Initiative, which has been our key partner, and in particular Dave Hodgins, who is here with us today.
Continue to do great work. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. Let me add an amendment to instruct the CRA to report back to this committee within 30 days of a detailed programmatic budget description prior to accepting the grant, and then instruct the CAO to report back to this committee on the CRA's report and proposed program with appropriate controller instructions, because that will, I think with the speed that this is moving, both of those are not part of this, but we're going to need them to be part of it for the acceptance of any grant. Mr. Rosendahl, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm excited about it, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to get on the ground floor of a new strategy with dealing with it. How does a commercial building, private sector building, the ownership of it, contact us and get engaged with us and see if they're eligible for this retrofitting?
Sure. The program elements are still being worked out. We will be actually using a portion of the grant funds to actually design the program, but conceptually, the way this would work is that the CRA would be the administrative entity on behalf of the city of Los Angeles. A building owner would engage a private energy services company to do an energy audit of their building and to create a retrofit plan. The building owner would then submit that retrofit plan as well as other due diligence documents to the CRA for approval. The CRA would approve the application package and then notify the County of Los Angeles that that application has been approved. At that point, the county would go ahead and essentially attach the tax lien to the building and create the special assessment for that building. Simultaneously, once the building owner has been notified that their application has been approved, that building owner would go ahead and engage a lender to actually finance the retrofit work. And then that special tax assessment and the tax lien would provide the repayment source and the security mechanism for that retrofit lender.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the committee? Thank you. Remember, short speeches win elections, so we appreciate your words. And we will go ahead and take a public comment at this point. Thank you. We look forward and good luck with the application. We look forward to seeing it back. Arnold Sachs is here for general public comment in committee. Mr. Sachs?
Thank you. Good morning. Arnold Sachs. I just would like to know if it's possible to find out anywhere the number of shovel-ready projects that have been started since via the Economic Recovery and Reinvestment Act? And number two, I was kind of caught up in part of the discussion regarding the training program for the green energy program, the DWP maybe getting new employees. How does that interface with the proposed layoffs that the city is going to have them, with the switching of people from departments to departments, and remembering that the DWP, LAX, and the harbor are all proprietary departments and not really under the scope of the city council. And so I was wondering, since one of the major concerns of the city is the pension plan, that people being hired for these new programs or graduating from the training program, how will they be entered into the pension plan program? Are there any steps to take action on the pension plan program? Because although they are proprietary departments and not under the no hiring limit, the no hiring ban imposed by the city council, the pensions are paid by the public in the city of LA. So you may increase their staffs, but you're not addressing the final costs of how that will equate out to the city public. And I was wondering if that's going to be included as part of the Economic Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would point to you both to answer your questions to recovery.lacity.org, as well as the gentleman from the CAO's office who's right here, Mr. Sachs. And the DWP will not be getting any new jobs from this. Using existing staff, they're helping private buildings to be identified for these funds. I hope that answers those questions, and thank you. This meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee on Reinvestment and Recovery is hereby adjourned. We will start the City Council meeting shortly. Thank you all.